What is up, guys? Random Money here with your Week 4 Fantasy LCS predictions. In this video, I'm going to break down all of the matchups for NA and EU LCS for Week 4. And I will be talking about some of the matches from previous weeks. So if you haven't seen them, this is your spoiler warning. But so far, this split, things have been incredibly interesting. There's been a lot of upsets. There have been a lot of things that nobody really predicted. And that's fantastic for me as a fan, but it makes things very difficult to predict for fantasy points. And I definitely think that even though I've done well at predicting maybe some of the top performers and some of the worst performers, I've been struggling a lot of times with some of those middle tier players, trying to figure out who's going to do the best. So this past week, I went through a lot of data. I spent probably 4 hours just crunching numbers. And unfortunately, I was not able to come up with a better solution. Once I ran all the data and came up with a solution, the solution was divergent, which meant that I didn't have enough data for the number of variables. So I'm going to try and go back and do some more number crunching, hopefully this week. But for right now, I don't have a better solution for those middle tier picks. So understand that there's definitely going to be some errors in my predictions, and I'm working on trying to give you guys an even better product than what I'm putting out now. But also, for a public service announcement, for those of you who didn't see my other video, I'm going to try and standardize when I upload things. So Mondays, I'm going to do roster management, which is just me walking through my fantasy drafts. Tuesday, I'm going to be doing these videos, which break down every match and every player. Wednesdays and Thursdays, if there's a new patch that comes out, I'll do a patch notes video whenever the patch notes get posted. Friday, I will do learn from the LCS videos. And then I'm also thinking about doing some more instructional content. So I'm thinking about possibly doing like a beginner's guide video. So if you're interested in that, if you're either a beginner or you have friends who are beginners who would be interested in a video like that, just let me know by leaving a comment, and I'll be happy to make a video like that. But let's get into the actual breakdown. So this is your summary, your TLDR. If you can't watch the entire video, your easy points this week are going to be TSM, Immortals, Cloud9, G2, Fnatic, and H2K. I don't think there's any surprises there. And then your bench warmers, the people that I would avoid playing this week, are Echo Fox, NRG, Phoenix, Vitality, Origin, and Unicorns of Love. The people that I think are risky that could pay off this week are Envy, Team Liquid, CLG, Apex, Shaka, Splice, Rockcat, and Giants. And I will go into more detail on which players I think from those teams are worth possibly risking. So for the rankings so far, I've got my rankings, how I rank all the teams, and then the number in the parentheses is what the ranking was last week, so you can see the change. So for NA, I've got TSM and Immortals, no change there. Cloud9 and Envy for 3 and 4. Really impressed with how Envy performed last week. I'm really excited to see how they perform this week. And then for 5, 6, and 7, I've got Liquid, CLG, and Apex. Still kind of the same teams in that mix. I just kind of reordered a little bit. Team Liquid played a lot better last week. And then the bottom, I've got Echo Fox, NRG, and Phoenix. NRG's down there basically because they're just not consistent at all, and you're not going to make the playoffs if you're not a consistent team. For EU, I've got G2 and H2K, of course, at the top. Fnatic is in that third spot, kind of pushing into the same tier as G2 and H2K. Shaka, Splice, and Rockcat are fighting for those final playoff spots in my mind. After them, Vitality, Giants, and Origin. I've been really impressed with how Giants has been playing. They're really trying to fight for one of those last playoff spots. And then I think Unicorns of Love is the worst team in EU now, unfortunately. So hopefully they can recover and do better. All right, I'm going to do a new thing this week. These are my crucial matchups. These are not necessarily the matchups that I think are like, the best teams fighting it. These are the matchups that are going to define how the league moves for the rest of the split. So this week I've got Cloud9 versus Envy. That's one of my crucial matchups. The reason why I have this is if Envy can do well against Cloud9 or beat Cloud9, then it will show that Envy is a force to be reckoned with. And they really are like going to be G2 status from Spring Split, where they could, challenge for the NA title in the Summer Split. I have NRG for P versus Phoenix 1. This is a crucial matchup for these two teams because the team that loses is pretty much guaranteed that they're not going to make the playoffs. You have to win the games against teams that are around the same ranking for you. And if you're on that bubble, if you're in that 6th through 9th spot, you have to beat those lower ranked teams if you're going to have a shot at avoiding relegation or making the playoffs. I also have TSM versus Envy for the same reason as Cloud9 versus Envy. If Envy can do well against TSM, then that's going to speak volumes about their organization, their team. And then I also have Apex versus Echo Fox for the same reason for Energy versus Phoenix. Whoever loses this game is going to really hurt their playoff chances. So it's a crucial game for both teams. For EU, I have Schalke versus G2. If Schalke can take a game off of G2 or make both of those games go 40 to 50 minutes, then Schalke's for real. So I'm really looking for them to really step up this week and have a really good fight against G2. I don't think they're going to beat G2, but I'm going to be looking at that match very closely to see how good Schalke really is. I have Vitality versus Giants as a key matchup because these two teams are near the bottom. Whoever loses this is really going to hurt their chances for playoffs. And Giants has definitely been showing that they're not a bottom-ranked team anymore. They're really improving very quickly. So I'm interested to see if they can take a game off of Vitality or possibly even beat Vitality. I also have Roccat versus Fnatic. Roccat had a really rough week 3, and I'm really looking at Roccat this week to see if they can rebound. That's the sign of a team that's going to be able to go far into the playoffs and do well in the latter half of the split. If Roccat can rebound and do well against Fnatic, not necessarily beat them, but be competitive against Fnatic, then that's going to be really important for Roccat and show that they will probably make the playoffs this split. And then for my last crucial matchup, I have Splice versus Origin. Origin showed some signs of brilliance last week. Splice has been, kind of a gatekeeper as far as, teams that could be in the top half of the split. So Origin has to do well against Splice this week to kind of prove that they deserve to be considered again as a playoff caliber team. So if Splice is able to crush Origin, then I'm really worried for Origin to make the playoffs this split. All right, quick on the nomenclature. If the win, tie, loss is in white, that means I think it's going to be a normal game, 30 to 35 minutes. So normal amount of fantasy points. If it's going to be red, then I think it's going to be a stomp, which means that the game will probably end before you can rack up a ton of fantasy points. This usually results in the winning team getting decent amounts of fantasy points and the losing team hardly getting any fantasy points. And then if the win, tie, loss is in blue, that means I think it's going to be a really close match. It'll go 45, 50 minutes long. Those are the games where you get a ton of fantasy points, regardless of whether you win or lose. Obviously, if you win, the winning team gets more fantasy points. But those are the games that you really want to look at as, the high-scoring games where you can rack up a lot of fantasy points. And then next to the player's name, I have 2 letters. The first letter is what I thought they were going to be last week, and the second letter is what they actually were last week as far as their tier. Okay, so teams. For this week, I've got S tier is TSM, H2K, Fnatic, and G2. They've all got pretty easy weeks. I think the most challenging matchup is going to be G2 versus Schalke for those teams, but I think they'll all go 2-0. For A tier, I've got Immortals, Cloud9, and Liquid. Liquid was actually S tier last week as far as team points. They're very good at capturing objectives. I don't think they're going to have as good a week this week, but I think that they can still possibly be A tier, maybe B tier. For B tier, I've got Schalke, Envy, and CLG. Envy was S tier last week. They played phenomenal, but this week they've got Cloud9 and TSM, which is a horrible, horrible week for them. I think they're going to still get some points, but I don't think they're going to have that S tier performance like they had last week. For C tier, I've got Giant, Origin, Roccat, Splice, and Apex. All of these teams have shown flashes of brilliance. All of these teams have potential. And I would not be surprised if one of these teams has just like a breakout week and winds up being S tier. However, there's a lot of risk in all of these teams, so be very careful if you're picking one of these teams um, for your team this week because the odds are against you. I only think that one of these teams is going to do really well this week, but I'm not sure which one it is. And then for D tier, I have Vitality, Energy, Phoenix, Unicorns of Love, and Echo Fox. Out of all of those teams, I would say that NRG actually has the best chance at not being D tier. But Energy's just been so inconsistent that it's hard for me to recommend them to anyone. All right, top lane. My S tier top laners, I have Impact, Expect, who's the new top laner for G2, replacing Kikis. He had a fantastic week last week. Gamsu and Hanser. Don't think there are any surprises there. For A tier, I have Huni, Odo, and Ray. Ray has actually been one of the top fantasy point scorers for the entire split, even though Apex has been struggling. And this week they're going up against Liquid and Fox, which I think could be a lot of points for Apex, especially for Ray, since he's just been really leading their team. So yeah, I do think he's worthy of that A tier. He was S tier last week. I think he'll be about A tier this week. For B tier, I've got Wonder, Parang, and Seraph. Rocket had a horrible week last week, but I think they're going to rebound. I think they're not going to be S tier like they were perhaps in like week 2, but I think they're going to be at least be B tier. And then Seraph on Envy's been doing phenomenal, so he's definitely a good kind of like backup top laner to have, maybe for like a flex spot. But they've got a really rough week this week. All right, C tier, I've got Smee-J, Lorlo, Steve, Cabo, and Darshan. Like I already said, Giants has been performing a lot better, so they're definitely moving up in my eyes as far as fantasy points are concerned. That said, I'm not sold on them yet. Yes, I know they've been like top fantasy points like the last week or the last 2 weeks. I'm not sold on them yet. I'm waiting to see a little bit more from them when they go up against some stiffer competition before I really get behind them. And then for D tier, I've got Soaz, Zig, Vivasachi, Quas, and KFO. Definitely disappointed to see Quas and KFO at the bottom there, but they just haven't been performing up to their potential, and that's just the fact of the matter. So hopefully they turn around and they start performing better. All right, for jungle, Trick, Reignover, Spirit, and Meteos are going to be my top junglers this week. I think all of those teams are going to go 2-0, and they should be able to get some decent amount of fantasy points. I think that a couple of those matchups will go into that 45 to 50 minute range, which allows those top level junglers to get a lot of fantasy points. For A tier, I have Yankos, Dardoch, and Svenskeren. Dardoch has been playing a lot better, and Team Liquid has been building team comps around him. If you've been watching Team Liquid lately, they've been doing these hyper mobile, super aggressive dive comps where they put Dardoch on someone like Rengar or Olaf, and they just speed him up to impossible speeds, and he just goes ham, essentially. That's been their team comps. So I think that he's going to get a decent amount of fantasy points this week, but it won't be necessarily as good as last week. And then for B tier, I've got Gilius, Trashy, and Airwalks. All three of those guys have been pretty consistent around that B tier. Like occasionally they'll be A tier, occasionally they'll be C or D tier, but they're roughly around the B tier every single week. So they're pretty consistently kind of that middle of the pack jungler. C tier, I have Maxlor, Proxen, Xmithy, Amazing, and Mighty Bear. Maxlor and Proxen did fantastic last week. That said, I think Giants and Envy are going to struggle a little bit more this week. We'll see if they prove me wrong. I think that those two guys, out of all 5 of those are the 2 guys that have the possibility to have a big week this week out of all the C tier players. And then for D tier, I have Shrimp, Sentinel, Move, Santorin, and Hard. I just saw some news that Sentinel has left Phoenix 1, but they have not announced who's replacing him. I don't think that many people are going to have Sentinel for Fantasy League, but just keep in mind that there was a Twitter post that said Sentinel was leaving Phoenix 1. I'm assuming they're just going to go with their backup jungler, who is Inori. But but I don't know. I don't know if they're bringing in somebody completely different. But Sentinel will no longer be part of Phoenix 1. All right, mid lane, I have Pobelter, Jensen, Fevabin, and Perks. Don't think there's any surprises there. Pretty much the same teams are going to be on top this week. A tier, I have Bjergsen, Fox, and Knight. I know this is going to be pretty controversial. Fox, I think he deserves to be up here. He's been very consistent, even though Schalke has not necessarily been that consistent. They've been focusing a lot of resources on him, and he's definitely been kind of like the top point scorer for their team. So I think he's going to be S tier this week because I think that the G2 match and the Giants match are going to go pretty long. They're going to be long games. So even if Schalke loses, Fox will get a lot of points. I have Knight up here because he's been one of the top point scorers from mid lane for the past 2 weeks. He's very high risk. I'm just telling you now, if you pick up Knight, understand that you're taking a pretty huge gamble. That said, Giants has done a really good job picking up fantasy points even when they lose. So as long as Giants keeps playing the way they're playing and doesn't try to change their game style too much, I think he'll still put up some good fantasy points. But understand he's a huge risk. But he could be a really easy pickup for people who maybe have mid laners who are struggling right now. For B tier, I have Ninja, Senkugs, and Betsy. Ninja's been playing really well. Envy's got their hell week this week, so just be aware of that. Senkugs and Betsy have been pretty solid in that middle range. So it's hard to go wrong with them if you need somebody as a backup, a solid backup. For C tier, I have Keen, Ryu, Power Evil, Phoenix, and Huhi. Keen has actually done really well, but Apex has struggled. I think that if Apex has an easier week, that he could be a really good pickup. That said, I think that they might struggle a little bit against Team Liquid this week. So he could be an A tier or a B tier next week, but I have him down at C tier just because I'm not so sure how they're going to do against Team Liquid. And then for D tier, I have Nuke Duck, Exile, GBM, Pyrene, and Froggen. Sadly, Froggen's at the bottom. I think Froggen's a fantastic mid laner. Echo Fox has just not been able to do well this split, and then this week they're going up against TSM, so I think they're gonna really struggle this week. All right, 80 carry S tier. I have Reckles, Sneaky, Sven, and Double Lift. Don't think there's any surprises there. Double Lift kind of had an off week last week. He was kind of C tier. I think he'll come back pretty strong and have a pretty solid week for fantasy points. For A tier, I have Mr. Rallis, Steelback, and Wild Turtle. So Mr. Rallis and Steelback have been doing really well. Very undervalued 80 carries. Steelback had a rough week 3, but if you look at just average fantasy points, he's pretty high up there. Same with Mr. Rallis. They're pretty solid. Even though their teams are not doing amazing, they're getting very good fantasy points for how well their teams are performing. Wild Turtle, obviously on Immortals, you would think Immortals would be getting a ton of fantasy points, but actually Wild Turtle's been getting less points on average than Steelback and Rallis. That said, I do still think the Wild Turtle is a great 80 carry and definitely an A tier kind of carry. B tier, I have Laud, Freeze, and Kabi. Okay, Laud played out of his freaking mind last week. It was unbelievable how well he played. This guy has a ton of potential. This guy is I'd equate him to kind of like Stixxay or Sven, maybe from Season 5, where he's just got so much potential and he could really blow up later in the split. And since Envy's already got Ninja and Seraph, that's why I'm really hyped about how well Envy is going to do this split. So if Laud can keep improving at the rate that he is, he's going to be a top tier 80 carry by the end of the split. Freeze, fantastic 80 carry. Fortunately, he's been pretty inconsistent. I think that he'll be back up into that B tier, maybe even A tier this week. And then Kabi has just been a rock solid 80 carry, kind of in that B tier range. So he's great. If you had some bad fantasy picks and you don't have a very strong 80 carry right now, he's a good person to pick up who pretty much always gets you a decent amount of fantasy points every week. C tier, I have Sunstar, Piglet, Police, Apollo, and Stixay. Sunstar, been playing fantastic. Um, he would be higher. I'm not so sure about Giants. I put him in the same kind of boat as Knight. I know I had Knight a bit higher up. Um, he's high risk. If you really need to go for a big play this week, pick him up because there's a chance that he's going to be a top point scorer this week, but it's a really high risk play. So just be aware of that. Piglet, he didn't even play last week. They had Fabi play last week. If you look at the tweets from Loco Doco, who's the coach, they didn't say that Piglet's bench. They didn't say that Fabi's the starter. They just said, hey, Fabi's been asking for some LCS time, so we decided to let him play this week. That's all they're saying right now. That said, I don't know what the real story is. I don't know if they're telling the truth. I don't know if they're thinking about replacing Fabi or Piglet with Fabi. So I don't know who's going to be the starter for Liquid this week. So just beware of that. That's why I would be very hesitant to start Piglet this week, just because we don't know if he's even playing this week. Then for D tier, I have Xpeke, Mash, Veritas, Keith, and OHQ. I've actually been really surprised at how well Xpeke has been doing. I mean, he's not an 80 carry, and he's been doing well. Playing at an LCS level in his non-standard role. He's kind of turning into the high of EU. So I'm very impressed with how Xpeke is performing. Unfortunately, Origin's not playing very well. So yeah, that's why he's in D tier. All right, rounding out with the support. So S tier for supports, I have Mithy, Yellowstar, Biofrost, and Adrian. I don't think there's any surprises there. Mithy and G2 seem like they're really kind of turning things into high gear, so I think they're going to be kind of top point scorers by the end of the split. A tier, I have Spraddle, Raze, and Vander. I think all of these guys have been pretty consistent as far as how many fantasy points they had. Raze and Rocket had a really bad week 3. I think that they'll return back to form and have a pretty decent week this week. For B tier, I have Smoothie, Matt, and Kasing. I have a asterisk next to Smoothie because he's still splitting time with Bunny Fufu, but he does seem like he's getting more points than Bunny on average. That said, I'd be hesitant to play either Smoothie or Bunny Fufu, just because we don't know how many games each one's going to play. All right, C tier, I have Hustlin, Hakuo, X-Special, Aframu, and Mingsix. I don't think there's any surprises there. A lot of these guys are just going to kind of C tier for most of the split. Hustlin and Hakuo were S tier last week. I think they have the potential to really surprise people this week. However, they've got hard schedules. I think the Giants could take a game, at least a game off of Vitality, possibly even beat Vitality. And I think that they could really challenge Shaka, but it's high risk. Like I said with the other Giants players, it's a really high risk to play them this week. Same thing with Envy. Envy's got a ton of potential. They've been racking up a lot of fantasy points, but this week they're up against Cloud9 and TSM. So if you play them, that is a really high risk play. So at most, I'd probably only play one of those players from those teams. I wouldn't play like 2 or 3 players from those teams, because then you could really screw yourself and just instantaneously lose your fantasy week. All right, and then rounding out the D tier, I've got Hybrid, Gate, Kiwi Kid, Hillsing, and Big. I don't think there's any surprises with those players. Okay, so summary. Like I said, the easy points this week: TSM, Immortals, Cloud9, G2, Fnatic, and H2K. And the teams that you want to avoid, your bench warmers, are Echo Fox, Energy, Phoenix One, Vitality, Origin, and Unicorns of Love. And then for those risky players, I already talked a lot about who I think is worthy of picking up this week. You've got Envy, Team Liquid, CLG, Apex, Shaka, Splice, Rocket, and Giants. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. If you want to see that beginner's guide video that I talked about at the beginning of the video, leave a comment saying, hey, yeah, I would benefit from that, or one of my friends would benefit from that. But I hope you guys have a great day, This is Ranmonium signing off.